The best time to plant, that most gardeners miss, starts long before seeds ever touch the soil. And I'm not talking about missing spring by a few days. I'm talking about ignoring the narrow planting window. When roots establish faster, stress drops dramatically and plants surge ahead without extra fertilizer or watering. Why planting by calendar dates is the mistake that quietly ruins results. Many gardeners plant based on dates printed on seed packets or general advice like, plant after the last frost. The problem is that plants don't grow by calendar pages. They grow by soil behavior. Soil temperature, moisture stability, microbial activity, and daylight balance all work together. And when they align, plants root deeply and grow aggressively. When they don't, seedlings stall, transplants sulk, and growth becomes slow and uneven. The best time to plant is not when the air feels warm. It's when the soil has reached a stable condition that allows roots to expand without shock. The overlooked planting window happens when soil warmth and moisture finally balance. The planting moment most gardeners miss occurs when soil temperatures rise enough to activate microbial life, but before surface heat begins pulling moisture away. For most temperate gardens, this window opens about 1 to 2 weeks after the soil stops feeling cold and sticky, and instead feels crumbly and slightly warm in the hand. At this point, soil microbes are actively converting organic matter into plant-available nutrients, which means seedlings feed naturally without needing synthetic inputs. Planting earlier actually forces roots into dormancy. On the other hand, planting later means your plants have to struggle through heat stress before they can really get established. So, why does root establishment matter more than fast top growth? Well, plants that establish roots quickly will outperform those fast-starting plants every single time. When roots grow before stress arrives, plants are able to regulate water better, resist pests more effectively, and honestly, they just require less intervention. For example, tomatoes that are planted when soil temperatures consistently hold above 55 degrees Fahrenheit will develop twice the root mass in the first 3 weeks, compared to tomatoes planted earlier into colder soil. That root advantage, really shows up later as thicker stems, heavier flowering, and steadier fruit production, even during those tough heat waves. And here's a little secret. The evening planting trick can reduce transplant shock instantly. One of the simplest ways to make the most of the best planting time is, just planting in the evening instead of the morning. Evening planting lets roots settle overnight without sunlight pulling moisture upward. This actually gives your plants a good 12 hours of recovery before they have to face any heat or wind. If you water deeply after planting, using about 1 gallon of water for each medium-sized transplant, that moisture really penetrates deeply instead of just evaporating away. Gardeners who switch to evening planting often notice, honestly, less wilting and much faster recovery within just a few days. It's interesting. Late summer planting quietly outperforms spring planting for many crops. Here's where even experienced gardeners can still get caught off guard. When done correctly, late summer planting often produces stronger crops than spring planting. At this time, the soil is fully warm, microbial life is really at its peak, and roots grow quite aggressively even as air temperatures slowly cool. Crops like carrots, beets, kale, broccoli, cabbage, bush beans, and even cucumbers just thrive when planted 8 to 10 weeks before the first expected frost. For example, carrots planted in late summer actually develop a sweeter flavor because those cooler nights slow sugar conversion. The key here is consistent moisture during the first 2 weeks. usually achieved by watering lightly every morning for 7 days, then switching to deeper watering every 3 days. Soil moisture timing actually determines success far more than just the total amount of rainfall you get. Planting right before a predictable moisture period, well, that gives your plants a massive advantage. This could come from seasonal rains, irrigation cycles, or even, honestly, just consistent morning dew. The goal isn't to soak the soil, but rather to keep steady moisture right at root depth. A good rule of thumb is to water deeply enough so that moisture reaches at least 6 inches down for seedlings and 10 inches for transplants. If the soil stays evenly moist but not waterlogged, for the first 10 days roots will expand outward instead of staying shallow. And, this one simple adjustment can actually double drought resistance later in the season. Now, you might be wondering why perennials and trees should be planted when growth appears to slow. Well, for trees, shrubs and perennials, the best planting time is often when visible growth slows but roots are still active. This really gives your plants the best chance to establish themselves. Early fall planting allows plants to establish roots without supporting leaf growth, which is honestly pretty ideal. A young fruit tree planted in early fall can spend, about 6 to 8 weeks building roots before winter dormancy sets in. Come spring, it wakes up with a fully functional root system and outgrows spring-planted trees by a noticeable margin. When planting woody plants, mixing native soil with compost at a ratio of 3 parts soil to 1 part compost encourages roots to move outward instead of staying trapped in rich planting holes. So here's how to read your soil instead of just guessing the right planting moment. Take a handful of soil from the planting depth and squeeze it gently. If it forms a tight ball that stays wet, well, it's too early. Now, if it falls apart immediately and feels dusty, that means it's too dry or honestly too late. The perfect planting soil will crumble easily, but still hold a bit of moisture. And when you notice earthworms active and small weed seedlings popping up naturally, that's your soil telling you it's ready. Nature always gives the signal before the plants respond. Gardeners who master timing really do work less and harvest more. Planting at the right time, well, it reduces fertilizer needs, minimizes pest pressure, and even cuts watering demands. Plants grown in sync with soil conditions just perform better. It's as simple as that. You spend less time correcting problems and more time harvesting. This is, the difference between gardening feeling like constant effort and gardening feeling like momentum. The real secret is planting when the soil is ready, not when tradition says it's time. The best gardeners aren't the ones who plant first. They're the ones who plant at the right moment. When you learn to read soil warmth, moisture balance, and root behavior, planting becomes precise instead of hopeful. That's when gardens transform from unpredictable to productive. If this guide helped you see planting differently, make sure you subscribe to Evergreen Garden, share this with another serious gardener, and leave a comment below telling me which crop you'll plant differently this season. Gardening gets better when we grow smarter together.